Imagine this. A teenager stands before a judge and claims she can shift his fate. And all of it over a $35 parking ticket. The morning session in Providence Municipal Court had been moving like a calm river. Light cases, familiar faces, the usual rhythm of small-town disputes. Judge Caprio sat with his steady, reassuring posture, the kind that made even nervous defendants breathe easier. People joked quietly. The clerk shuffled papers. Nothing hinted that the tone of the room was about to snap in half. Then she walked in. A 17-year-old girl, ordinary at first glance, yet strangely magnetic. Not a caricature or someone playing witch, but a modern kid who looked like she lived halfway between TikTok and a bookstore's spiritual aisle. A neat stack of woven bracelets circled her wrist. A worn, dark blue tarot pouch hung from the side of her backpack. Her eyes, sharp, focused, but carrying something unsettled, made a few people straighten in their seats. Instead of resting her hands on the edge of the podium, she set the tarot deck on it with deliberate calm, as if she were placing evidence. A few people chuckled under their breath. Not loudly, just the kind of nervous laugh people allow themselves when they think someone's being dramatic. Judge Caprio lifted an eyebrow, more curious than annoyed. Before he could speak, she slid her thumb across the deck and pulled out a single card, a tall, cracked tower against a storm-dark sky. "Judge," she said, her voice steady but low enough to make everyone lean in. "Before we start, I need to warn you. Today, the tower card crossed your path, and it's not meant for me." Her tone wasn't threatening. It was too controlled for that. More like she was stating a fact she wished wasn't true. The laughter in the room stopped immediately. Judge Caprio's smile was gentle, unshaken. "Well," he said, "how about we begin with why you're here today? Because for now, I'm more concerned about your parking ticket than my future." She didn't flinch. She didn't even look embarrassed. "This ticket isn't real," she replied quietly. "It's a mistake. Or the system wants to break me, like it breaks a lot of people here." The bluntness in her voice silenced the room. No theatrics, no giggles now. Just a teenager speaking with a kind of hard-earned certainty no 17-year-old should have. Judge Caprio leaned forward, the humor fading from his expression. He had seen every type of attitude in that courtroom: bravado, deflection, fear, frustration. But this was different. There was something trembling beneath the surface of her composure, something that looked more like fear than arrogance. The card on the podium caught a sliver of light from the courtroom windows, its cracked tower almost glinting. And in that moment, everyone understood. Whatever this was, whatever this girl was fighting, it wasn't about $35. It was about something much heavier. Judge Caprio shifted slightly in his chair, softening his voice as he asked her the usual opening questions: name, age, address. Routine things meant to ground the conversation, pull it back into the familiar lanes of courtroom procedure. But the girl didn't relax. Her shoulders stayed tight, as if bracing for an impact she'd predicted long before walking in. When he asked who was driving the vehicle the day of the citation, she answered with a clarity that made the room tilt. "I don't have a license, Judge. I wasn't behind the wheel. The car belongs to my mom. She was at work. And the plate in the camera photo, it isn't ours." A ripple of confusion moved through the audience. This wasn't the story anyone expected from the girl who entered with a tarot deck. Judge Caprio rested his hands together. "So, you're saying the ticket was issued to the wrong vehicle?" She nodded, but her jaw tightened, as if she was swallowing something heavier than frustration. "It's not just wrong," she said. "It's careless. It could cost us money we don't have." Her tone had lost the mystical edge she used earlier. Now it carried the weight of someone forced to grow up too quickly. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a neatly folded sheet of paper. an enlarged printout of the violation photo. Even from a distance, the difference was clear. The body shape was close, the color nearly identical, but the license frame in the image wasn't theirs. A stranger's car had triggered the ticket, yet it landed in their mailbox. Judge Caprio asked where her mother was, and a woman in faded scrubs rose from the back row. Her exhaustion clung to her like an extra layer. Hair tied up hastily, circles under her eyes, name badge still clipped on from the night shift. She managed a small nod, but her voice cracked. "I work overnights at the hospital," she said. "Sometimes 12-hour runs. I thought the ticket was ours. I didn't check twice. We moved recently. Everything's been chaotic." The girl glanced back at her mother, not with irritation, but with something closer to protectiveness. Judge Caprio gave the girl a thoughtful look. "And the cards? Why bring them here?" Her breath trembled on the way out. The bravado from earlier slipped, revealing a rawness she'd tried to hide. "I didn't mean to threaten anyone. I'm not into curses. She hesitated, eyes lowering to the tower card still resting on the podium. When everything in your life feels like it's falling apart, sometimes you need something to hold on to, even if it's just a symbol, even if it's silly. The honesty in her voice broke the last remnants of skepticism in the room. She unfolded another picture, her mother in scrubs, standing next to their aging car, its bumper scuffed from years of use. No fancy rims, no custom frame, nothing like the vehicle on the citation. "We didn't file an appeal," the girl said softly. "We didn't know how. And Mom's too tired to deal with more paperwork when she's trying to keep us afloat." The courtroom's energy shifted. People who earlier smirked at her tarot pouch now leaned forward, sympathy replacing amusement. No one saw a dramatic teenager anymore. They saw a kid shouldering the weight of an entire household. And for the first time since she'd walked in, there was no laughter. Just a collective understanding that her fight wasn't about superstition, but survival. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses and signaled for the clerk to pull up the digital file. The monitor flickered, illuminating the bench with a cold, bluish glow. Conversations in the audience faded as he leaned closer, scrutinizing every inch of the image. What he saw made his calm expression harden. The vehicle on the citation did resemble the mother's car at a glance. Same shade, similar silhouette. But the license frame had a thin chrome edge theirs didn't have. A subtle difference, but unmistakable when studied with care. Something about it nagged at him. He straightened, more alert than before. "One moment," he said, and the room stilled again. He asked the mother to approach. She hesitated, clutching her purse strap, but stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly, exhaustion etched deep into her posture. When the judge asked if she recognized the vehicle in the photo, she answered with a quiet apology. "I thought it was ours. I was rushing to bed after a double shift. I should have checked, but I didn't." There was no defensiveness in her voice, only shame and fatigue. The girl watched her mother with a flicker of guilt, as if wishing she had shielded her from having to speak at all. Before the judge could respond, a voice from the second row broke in. "Judge, if I may, I know that parking lot." Heads turned toward a middle-aged man in a work jacket, oil stains marking the sleeves. He looked surprised by his own boldness, but continued anyway, dipping his chin respectfully. "Those cameras misread plates all the time. Happened to me last winter. My truck got flagged even though I was out of state." The courtroom reacted with murmurs. Nothing rowdy, just startled agreement. He wasn't there to help the girl. He was just tired of faulty systems no one questioned. Judge Caprio listened closely, nodding once, the gears turning visibly. "Thank you," he said. "That's useful information." Then he turned back to the teenager. "You might be onto something, though I suspect your deck had nothing to do with it." This time, the room laughed softly, not mockingly, but with a shared sense of relief that the tension had finally cracked open. The girl exhaled for the first time since the hearing began. Not a smile, just a small, startled breath, as though she wasn't used to being taken seriously. But the moment of levity vanished when the judge's tone shifted again. "There's one issue I need to clarify before making any decision." He tapped the corner of the photo. "If what I'm noticing is correct, this may not be the only mistaken ticket issued recently." The mother's face drained of color. The girl's grip tightened around the podium. Someone in the back whispered, "What does he mean?" Judge Caprio didn't elaborate. He simply rose from his chair, speaking to the clerk in a low voice before stepping briefly into his chambers. The door clicked shut behind him. The courtroom remained suspended in uneasy silence. No one shuffled papers. No one checked their phone. It was the stillness that settles when people sense a turning point they can't fully see yet. The girl stared at the tower card lying face up beside her, the cracked structure illuminated by the courtroom lights. For the first time, she didn't look intimidated by it. She looked ready to confront whatever truth was about to surface. When the judge returned, his expression held a weight that hadn't been there earlier. And in that heavy quiet, everyone understood. The case had grown far bigger than a teenager, her mother, and a single faulty citation. When Judge Caprio stepped back into the courtroom, something in his demeanor had shifted. The warmth was still there, but it now carried an edge, an alertness of someone who'd just uncovered a thread worth pulling. He settled into his chair and spoke with measured clarity. "I contacted the Parking Enforcement Division during our brief recess. The camera that recorded your supposed violation was malfunctioning for several days." A hum of surprise spread across the room. He continued, "Not one or two errors, dozens." The mother covered her mouth with her hand. The teenager didn't move, as if afraid any motion might break the fragile moment of truth hanging in the air. Judge Caprio lifted a printed list he had retrieved from his chambers. "Your ticket is one of 47 issued during the same malfunction window. And here's the troubling part. Most of them went to vehicles from older neighborhoods, lower income areas." It wasn't an accusation, but the implication was unmistakable. The room reacted with a mixture of outrage and disbelief. Small gasps, whispers, the shuffle of people adjusting in their seats as if the news physically pushed them. The girl's eyes widened, but not with triumph. There was no gloating. No, "I told you so." Instead, she looked almost sorrowful, as if this confirmed a fear she had carried long before she walked into the building. "I didn't want to start anything big," she said softly. "I just wanted someone to listen. Because when things keep going wrong, it stops feeling random." The judge studied her carefully. "You could have appealed through the regular process. Why didn't you?" The question wasn't harsh, only honest. She clasped her hands together, staring at the podium's wooden grain. "We barely keep up with rent. Mom's always exhausted. Filling forms, paying fees, waiting weeks. It feels like a luxury. So people just accept whatever the envelope says." Her mother's shoulders trembled at that. For a long moment she'd stayed silent, trying to remain composed, but something inside her cracked open. "I've been telling her to avoid conflict," she whispered. "To stay small, to not draw attention. I thought it would keep her safe." Her voice wavered, then strengthened. "Instead, she's the one teaching me courage." The audience went still. It wasn't drama. It was something raw, gentler, unmistakably real. Judge Caprio looked between the two of them, the mother's trembling lips, the daughter's steady eyes, the quiet solidarity binding them. He'd seen thousands of cases, but very few moments like this. Moments where the human heart of a dispute revealed itself so plainly. He placed the faulty ticket list on the bench. "This isn't just about your family," he said. "This affects dozens of households, people who don't have time or resources to challenge a mistake." The girl exhaled shakily. She wasn't scared anymore. She looked almost resolute. And for the first time since the hearing began, the tower card on the podium seemed irrelevant, replaced by something far more powerful: a teenager's unwillingness to accept quiet injustice. Judge Caprio leaned back, thoughtful. "Sometimes," he said gently, "it takes one person refusing to back down for the rest of the truth to surface." The courtroom didn't make a sound. The case had officially turned into something far larger, not through theatrics, not through mysticism, but through a simple insistence on fairness. And the room waited, knowing the next words would carry even more weight. Judge Caprio took a slow breath, as if weighing not just the case, but the hearts behind it. When he finally spoke, his tone carried a steadiness that filled the entire room. "First," he said, "your citation is dismissed, completely, without conditions." The audience nodded, some in relief, some in quiet agreement. But he wasn't finished. "I'll also be requesting a full audit of every ticket issued by that camera during the malfunction period, all 47. He paused, letting the significance settle. "This isn't a clerical matter. This is about trust between the city and its people." The girl blinked rapidly, caught between disbelief and a growing sense of vindication. Her mother clasped her hands tightly, as if trying to contain an emotion too large to manage. Then the judge turned directly to the teenager. "You came in here with a deck of cards," he said gently. "I don't put my faith in symbols or predictions, but I do believe in individuals who speak up when something's wrong, even when they're young, and even when they think no one will listen." The girl lowered her gaze, embarrassed by the attention. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then whispered, "I didn't mean to be dramatic. I just didn't want us to be ignored." Judge Caprio's expression softened. "You weren't ignored, not for a moment. And you reminded me of something important. Never underestimate how clearly young people see the world. Sometimes they spot the cracks long before adults do." A few people in the gallery exhaled audibly, moved by the sincerity of his words. Still, the girl shifted uneasily, her fingers brushing the edge of the tower card on the podium. "I shouldn't have started with the card," she said. "It probably sounded ridiculous." But the judge shook his head lightly. "Everyone has their own way of finding courage," he replied. "Yours just happened to come in a blue pouch." The room chuckled softly, warm laughter this time, not the nervous kind that greeted her earlier. Even the clerk smiled discreetly at her desk. Then the judge's gaze moved to the mother. "You work nights," he said, "and you still made it here to stand beside your daughter. That tells me everything I need to know about the bond between you two." Her lips trembled. She pressed a tissue to her eyes, trying to hide the tear before it escaped, but it slipped down her cheek anyway. "You've raised a young woman who isn't afraid to challenge something unfair," he continued. "That's not troublemaking. That's integrity. And the world needs more of it." Silence swept across the room. Emotion thick, unpretentious, genuine. The girl carefully picked up the tower card and tucked it back into the pouch. With a quiet, almost shy smile, she said, "Looks like it fell for someone else today." The room laughed, this time openly, freely. Even the judge covered a small smile with his hand. For the first time since the hearing began, the air felt light. The tension that had followed her in, like a shadow, finally lifted. But beneath that warmth was something deeper, a recognition that her voice had mattered more than she ever expected, and that this moment had changed not just a ruling, but the way the entire room understood courage. The tension had dissolved, but something meaningful lingered in the air, an echo of everything that had just unfolded. Judge Caprio prepared to call the next case, flipping a page on his docket, when the teenager paused at the edge of the podium. "Judge," she said softly. He glanced up, surprised she hadn't already stepped away. She held the blue tarot pouch in both hands now, as if weighing something invisible inside it. Her voice, though quiet, carried across the room. "I wasn't honest earlier," she admitted. "I didn't see the tower for you. I saw the justice card this morning before we came. I just didn't know if you'd take me seriously." The confession drew a gentle murmur from the gallery. Not amusement, understanding. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, studying her with a thoughtful expression that bordered on fatherly. "Sometimes," he replied, "the truth carries more weight when it stands on its own feet." She gave a tiny nod, absorbing the words. For the first time all morning, her shoulders loosened. As she stepped away from the podium, a few people in the audience began to clap, tentative at first, then steady. Not a spectacle, not a performance, just gratitude, recognition. A room full of strangers acknowledging a moment of integrity from someone most would have dismissed on sight an hour earlier. Her mother joined her near the aisle. "You okay?" she whispered. The girl breathed out a small laugh. "I think so." They started toward the door when her phone buzzed sharply. She glanced down, expecting a message from her brother or a classmate asking where she'd disappeared to that morning. But the text read, "You're all over TikTok. Clip of you in court hit 1 million views already." She stopped walking. Her mother leaned in. "What's wrong?" She turned the screen toward her, disbelief widening her eyes. Is that good?" the girl asked quietly, half hopeful, half terrified of what sudden attention might bring. Her mother didn't answer right away. She looked at the screen, then at her daughter, then at the courtroom door they were about to step through, a door that suddenly seemed like the threshold to something unpredictable. Finally, she exhaled. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "One step at a time." The girl nodded, clutching the phone but not looking at it again. Back at the bench, Judge Caprio straightened a stack of files and prepared to move on. But before calling the next defendant, he lifted his gaze toward the audience, toward the place where the girl had stood only moments earlier. And in a calm, reflective tone, he said, "I've seen a great many cases in this courtroom. But let me remind everyone of something. Laws create order, yes. But justice, real justice, begins with people who refuse to stay silent when something is wrong." The room quieted, as if absorbing a truth too steady to ignore. He lowered his eyes to the next file, yet the weight of his words lingered like a lingering chord at the end of a symphony. Soft, resonant, unforgettable. Outside the courtroom doors, the girl and her mother stepped into the hallway where sunlight streamed through high windows. The morning that began with fear, confusion, and a single tarot card had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted. Not fate, not magic, but a reminder that even the smallest voice, spoken at the right moment, could tilt the scales more than anyone expected. And their story, now carried by strangers on screens they'd never meet, was just beginning.